Mayor, thank you for taking the time. I know you've been incredibly busy talking about obviously COVID in the community, and now we have issues of racial injustice and protests happening every single night here in Metro Phoenix. I want to talk to you a little bit about implicit bias training and de-escalation training. Is it mandatory for Phoenix police officers to undergo implicit bias training annually?
One of the things I'm really proud of that we've done this year is totally rehauled the way we do training at the Phoenix Police Department. We used to go to a military style training where it was really very similar to what you would see before you went into combat. Now we're doing more scenario-based training where people can really go out there and practice the situations that they're going to see out in the field. We have implemented implicit bias training and de-escalation training. We also now have training where officers are put in a situation where another officer is violating policy and they cannot graduate unless they show that they will stand up and say, here is what the policy is, we have to do the right thing here.
Have you seen an improvement within the police department since implicit bias training and de-escalation training had been implemented?
We have gotten both positive feedback from our officers and our community. The new training really recognizes the fact that our officers are out there working independently, that they have a huge number of situations that they have to deal with, and that we should equip them as best as we can with those real tools out there, because you cannot predict what will happen out in the community, but you can prepare.
I want to take you to a situation that happened in upstate New York, in Buffalo, New York, where there was a peaceful protester and he was pushed backwards by two officers. Those officers were suspended. The next day, more than 50 of those officers resigned from the riot police force. There's been a real issue of toxicity within police departments across the country. Do you believe that there is that same toxicity here within the Phoenix Police Department?
It was hard to watch the footage from Buffalo, and certainly I hear that there's still been a difficult recovery for the man who was implemented. There's been a lot of footage that have been difficult to watch, and I hope inspires all of us to do better. What our officers have told me is there's no one who is more frustrated by a bad cop than a good cop. I believe that we have to have safe communities, and we have to better equip our officers to deal with the huge amount of challenges that come before them. Our officers care about the community and want to do the right thing. But we have to have, as a country, a real conversation about what we are doing and how we can do better. We've committed as a city to take a hard look and have real conversations about where we have fallen short and where we can do better, including a comprehensive look at de-escalation and training. I hope we've been willing to have hard conversations here, but bringing everyone to the table. If our entire community agrees something can be better, then it's much more likely to succeed.
There is a change.org position, a change.org petition, and it deals with the use of chemical weapons, specifically tear gas, something that is banned from war, but is currently being used on civilians during protests. Do you believe that the Phoenix Police Department should be able to fire tear gas at protesters?
We at the city have just funded a budget that will bring in some new civilian expertise to help us at the city to look at these difficult questions. We want to have the best practices in policing and community safety. We want everyone to feel like they have a safe place to call home in Phoenix. I think it's important to have expertise and to really be thoughtful about these conversations. If we take one tool off the table, will that result in a better result or not? So I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I do think it's important for me as mayor to hear from communities that have made that decision and what the result was. Did they feel like it was safer, or did they feel like taking a less lethal tool away led to a higher level of use of force? Certainly, my goal is that we would never need that tool, and I hope that it is used sparingly and infrequently. As someone who, frankly, part of the reason I got into politics was I grew up as a young person with asthma, and so the ability to breathe is something that we really want to protect as this community, but I want to have a full conversation about what these change in policies mean.
Breonna's Law was just recently passed, and I want to kind of go through line by line and get your reaction, parts of Breonna's Law, and to see if that's something that the city of Phoenix should be adopting. Body cameras must start recording no less than 5 minutes before a search warrant is executed. Do you agree?
We this year have fully implemented body cameras out on all of our frontline personnel. I think that is incredibly valuable and really protects everyone involved. So I think the more we can use body cameras, the better both our community and our officers will have as an experience.
I'll push you a little bit further. No less than 5 minutes before a search warrant is executed. Do you think that the time needs to be rolled back to at least 5 minutes so that the camera isn't starting to roll once the moment that incident occurs? Do you believe that the officer should be rolling and recording prior to executing that search warrant?
I do think the more we can have footage, the better, and so we need to have that transparency in our department. I don't know the details of what happens at the 5-minute clock, and so would want to have a better understanding of how they came up with that number, but I have been a strong advocate for body cameras. We have spent millions and millions of dollars to implement that body camera program in the city, and I think it's gotten strong support from both our residents and our officers.
Another part of Breonna's Law is that body camera footage must be kept for a minimum of 5 years.
We have really looked hard at how we use body camera footage in this community and making it more available. One of the most difficult things is the amount of data, and so I've supported additional investments in how we can produce that data and get it out in our community. We've really made an effort this year to get data out as transparently as possible. I think it does make sense to maintain it as long as possible.
There is a Justice in Policing Act. Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Cory Booker are proposing this in Congress. And I want to go through it with you and also get your thoughts on what is the Justice in Policing Act. Setting a national standard for use of force. Would you like to see a national standard set?
We have really benefited from some of the national conversations, in particular President Obama's task force on 21st century policing. The city of Phoenix contributed information to that and benefited from it. So I do think there would be great value in having a national standard.
What about expanding independent investigations into police misconduct so that the own police department isn't investigating their own officers?
This year, the city of Phoenix, for the first time, created an Office of Accountability and Transparency. We have actually had for decades a conversation in the city of Phoenix about whether we should have a civilian oversight function. Many large cities, in fact most have it, and I'm proud to be the mayor who brought that forward. Was a lot of community conversation, very complex. It is a policy that will continue to evolve and improve, but we did it, and we also funded it fully in our budget that we passed last week.
And lastly, or two more things, establishing a national police misconduct registry. There's been a real issue, I think, across this country that when an officer has a lot of demerits or a lot of cases against him or a lot of claims from the public against him, they can easily move to another police department if no national registry or a database is given about that. Do you think that there should be a national registry or a database that really does track the misconduct of police officers so they can't move from one police department to another police department?
The city of Phoenix has really invested in background investigations before we hire officers, and we think it's been helpful to us in our recruitment and hiring. But to the extent we can have more national information, I do see value in that.
Your thoughts on what the mayor of San Francisco is doing with their police department, and we're seeing it happen in Minneapolis, where they are disbanding the entire police force and rehiring and retraining. San Francisco police officers are now going to be replaced with trained, unarmed professionals to respond to calls for help on non-criminal matters involving mental health, the homeless, school discipline, and neighbor disputes. Do you agree with that philosophy, that officers don't need to be out there responding to non-criminal matters involving mental health, involving the homeless, and school disciplinary issues?
We have been having a conversation in Phoenix about the need for more investments in fighting addiction, mental health, homelessness. We underfund those functions at the state, county, at all levels of government here, and the Phoenix police officers, as well as police officers throughout the state, end up being the frontline mental health workers. You know, we have a suicide crisis in the state of Arizona, and so often it is our officers who are the ones that are helping people see through that there is life ahead and that suicide is not the right decision. So I would love to see increased investment in fighting addiction, in mental health resources, in more support for people experiencing homelessness. We ask our police officers to shoulder so many burdens in this community, and we all could do better.
And further on that point, isn't that what the whole movement of defund the police department really is that they want to reallocate a portion of the resources that are being funded to the police department and using the reallocation of those resources to then hire those people who could respond to addiction calls or mental health calls or homeless issues.
I've been trying to spend a lot of time listening and learning from different perspectives in the community. I would say that that term is used by a wide variety of people to mean a wide variety of concerns. But when I talk to a huge variety of stakeholders in this community, they do say we are asking our police officers to shoulder too much of the burden on areas such as mental health. We are a community experiencing crises related to addiction to mental health, and we have to all step up to do better.
Talk about the demilitarization of police departments across the country. Two of my friends who are federal agents, I spoke to them last week, and we're just trying to pick their brain because I too am trying to learn. And I thought, they would be two great people to talk to about the demilitarization of police departments across the country. Both of those federal agents told me that the militarization of police departments really began in 2002 and 2003 after the United States went into war with Iraq, and the federal government began selling many of those militarized vehicles and weapons to police departments around the country. Does the city of Phoenix buy any militarized equipment from the federal government?
The city of Phoenix has not participated in the program where we would purchase surplus military. If you look at the major capital expenditures we've been making as a department this year, it's to help us better communicate with the community and better transparency. So we had a very large expenditure this year to equip our officers with body camera, and I think that is reflective of the approach we are taking. We've also put a huge amount of money into training and into standing up new squads, such as the Crisis Intervention Team, which is trained in mental health counseling and some of the issues facing our community. So we are really trying to put forward an approach at the City of Phoenix that says we want everyone to feel safe in our community, we want people to go home safely, and we understand communication is a key part of that.
If we are to move forward, and if this movement is to really impact change, do you believe that the issues of systemic racism should be taught in elementary school? Is there a lack of education that is happening with the young generation in this country, that those issues are not being talked about in a school informative setting?
One of the things that I have really benefited from as a parent is there's been a lot more resources out about how to talk to your children about these difficult issues. I think we need to address them at an age-appropriate level, and it should include elementary school, but you can't wait until then. There was several events with our youth this weekend, and our youth are very aware of these issues, even at a young age. Certainly it is most acute for our communities of color, but I think all of our young people are aware of the issues. Something I'm struggling with as a parent myself. I'm a mother of a 3-year-old, so very young child, and we had the television on. It was a story about something happening in California at a city hall, but my son just knows that I work at a place at City Hall, and so he reacted to that in a very personal way, and it brought up for me that I have to start talking to him at this age. I don't face the same challenges that many others do in this community, and I'm trying to be very cognizant of that, but it's something every parent has to address. And it's much bigger than just one issue. We really have to talk about poverty. We have to talk about economic opportunity. We're trying to think big picture at the City of Phoenix, so even as we recover from COVID, We're trying to make sure our small business aid programs reach our entire community, and we've focused on low-income census tracts. We have a great program to help restaurants restart. It's a real point of pride for us. The first 25 applications we received were people who were applying in Spanish. So I hope that's a beginning of a sign that we're having conversations about access to resources and how do we have economic opportunity for everyone in our community. We will succeed as a city if we give the resources to all the brilliant young people, all the brilliant entrepreneurs in our community, and not just those who have come from families that have traditionally had access. Phoenix is known as a city for opportunity, and it maybe has not reached everyone within our borders, but I hope we can be a leader in this national conversation and a little bit of a source of hope for our country.
It's been 2 weeks of protest here in Phoenix, and I don't believe anyone's been arrested in the last 2 weeks. I know we had some issues on that first weekend. Are you proud? Are you disappointed? What are your thoughts on what you've seen every night, protesters out there peacefully protesting in the streets of Phoenix?
It has been wonderful to see that the vast majority of people exercising their rights have done so peacefully. I am particularly inspired by the fact that it feels like the full diversity of our community has been out and participating. It really looks like it is not just one community or one age, but people of all races, ethnicities, and ages, although particularly our young people. And it's also been conversations that I've had, whether it's with the business leaders or the leaders of our sporting community, our nonprofits, our faith leaders. Everyone feels motivated to do better, and that gives me great hope that we are going to find solutions. This is a conversation we've had as a country for far too long, but I am genuinely hopeful that this time is different and we'll do better.
And this is my last question regarding this topic. There had been a week of very peaceful protests, but it was last weekend when the governor decided to call on the National Guard to bring in military-style vehicles to manage the protesters. What are your thoughts? Some governors refused to do that. They thought it would only escalate issues or escalate matters. Your thoughts on the governor calling in the National Guard to manage protesters?
Our City of Phoenix Police Department has a community response squad that goes out and, in plain clothes, tries to work with the people who are exercising their rights to make sure that they can do so safely. They develop relationships often with the people who are most involved in activism. I believe that if we have good communication, it will allow people to exercise their rights peacefully and to be able to do so in a way that really moves the dialogue forward as much as possible while protecting everyone involved. So that's the type of approach that I think is most effective. I understand that people want to be heard. We are trying to listen as much as possible at City Hall, have difficult conversations, and come out. But I believe whenever you can, if you have people looking each other in the eye, developing relationships, and with a peaceful attitude, that is what will lead to change.